and welcome everybody. Good evening and welcome to Productivity and Connectivity in Construction, brought to you by Electronic Media Services and COMIT projects. Please let us know where you're dialing in from today in the chat and let us know what you do too. Pop your LinkedIn profile in the chat to connect with other attendees. So I can see some participants joining now. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for attending. Good evening and welcome again. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Dalbusco. This is Productivity and Connectivity in Construction, brought to you by Electronic Media Services and COMIT projects. Please let us know where you're dialing in from today by typing in the chat. Pop your LinkedIn profile in the chat. We can see some more attendees joining now. Make sure you please turn your chat to all panelists and attendees. That would be great. Thank you very much. And there are two ways to engage today. So you've already discovered the chat function. We recommend you change the audience to all panelists and attendees so you can interact with each other too. If you have a question for the panel, please put it in the Q&A box. We recommend you use the Q&A function because we'll not be checking the chat for questions. So questions in the Q&A, you should be able to like the questions that are your favorites. That makes sure we answer the questions that you want answered. Questions into Q&A, go in there and like your favorites, interact in the chat. This session is being recorded. Now for your agenda. Next slide, please, James. Thank you. Welcome again to Productivity and Connectivity in Construction, brought to you by Electronic Media Services and COMIT projects. Shortly, we'll discover why connectivity is more important now than ever, and then we'll outline tools and tips for great connectivity for you, no matter where you are or when you got there. We'll go to Q&A just before 5:30 and we'll close at around 20 to 6. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Next slide, please, James. And our first speaker is an experienced leader with a demonstrated history of working in the construction and research industry, skilled in operations management, the digital revolution, highways, emerging technologies, feasibility studies, and project estimation. He's a strong business development professional who graduated from University of Central Lancashire. Welcome, Stuart Young. Our final speaker this evening is a director at Electronic Media Services, focusing on internet connectivity for difficult or underserved mobile and temporary locations. Recent projects include delivery of fiber to the premise broadband for a high-profile house builder and microwave-based connectivity for a wide range of commercial customers. He provides enterprise-grade, load-balanced and bonded 4G, 5G-based services to clients in diverse sectors, including the creative, construction, retail, logistics, and broadcasting industries, plus various government bodies. Welcome, Lawrence Walker. And now for the main event, I'd like to hand over to Lawrence and Stuart to introduce the session. Next slide, please, James.
So thank you very much indeed, Vanessa, for that excellent introduction, comprehensive. And thank you all to everybody for joining us this afternoon for what I hope is going to be an interesting session. So EMS and COMIT, I would say we're an industry-leading collaboration between obviously a commercial company being EMS and a construction industry membership-based organisation being COMIT. Our relationship and indeed COMIT's activities date all the way back to 2003. And the two organisations have, I think, been providing thought leadership and access to resources for the construction industry since that point in time. Stuart.
Stuart, you're on mute. Stuart, you're on mute.
We've been looking to improve productivity and add value for the industry since we started. Diverse thoughts and views. Well, I'm going to share a couple in a second or two, and hopefully just give you an idea of how and why we rely so much on connectivity. Next slide, please, James. Okay, so a little bit about COMIT. COMIT is a collaboration platform made up with members from industry that brings together owners, contractors, solution providers, and academia. It has a long history of developing, running, and documenting demonstration projects with industry that focus on increasing value. A recent example of a project in conjunction with EMS was where we bid to develop a solution for the COVID-19 tracking app. This is currently being deployed in industry. Behind all technological initiatives in our industry is a simple goal, and that is improving productivity. Often the best improvements come from a combination of knowledge, process, and technology. By being collaborative with industry stakeholders, COMIT helps create new ways of enablement through process improvement and ultimate demonstration projects. The long-term aim is to reduce capital project costs by up to 30% and a reduction in cycle times by up to 10%. Next slide, please, James. Why connectivity is more important now than ever? Well, the good news is this, that with the advent of technology, the industry is changing rapidly to use systems and processes capable of radically transforming what we do by improving productivity and helping deliver projects on time and, more importantly, to budget. I'm going to talk to the wants, the need, the reality, and the answer will come after that. This year, more than ever, we have seen an increase in the requirement for high quality bandwidth with high performing networks from day one on construction projects. This has largely been driven by the impact on the industry of COVID-19, as well as the move to the digital information era with virtual meetings using solutions like Microsoft Teams, Zooms, etc., that put an increased reliance on connectivity. For these to be effective, a high performing internet connection is required. If the site doesn't have the required network bandwidth for these to work, those involved in these meetings will need to travel to alternate locations, taken away from managing site operations. Having to revert to slower manual ways is not really an option. Over the past several years, we have slowly but surely made the transition from total paper-based systems to relatively complex data-driven applications that require good connectivity to run anything and everything from planning software to mobile data field mobility solutions. And believe me, there are lots of them. These require robust, reliable connections capable of handling all the data that we need to send and receive. Warning. If we cannot use our now commonly used applications for planning and executing the works, it creates for some very grumpy people with some huge frustrations, and the outcome of that is delays and disruptions to the work. So real-time monitoring is 99% dependent on connectivity, whether latent or constant, and without this good connectivity, it's not possible to work efficiently or sometimes even at all, meaning that site teams have to revert to slower manual ways, which may mean extra travel between sites and offices, and of course increased costs. So another thing to throw in here, you may, in addition to all that, you may end up using out-of-date information, and we know where that can lead. Next slide, please, James. So if we could have fixed BT network lines from the get-go, we'd have no problems. Well, nearly no problems. Because in construction, you do get the odd problem here and there. However, in my experience, these frequently take circa 6 months to install, and with high excess construction charges in remote locations, it can be difficult to justify if the project duration isn't more than 18 months. So that's basically a non-starter. So does this mean that the project team must rely on mobile data services that can be slow, unreliable, and costly? 4G mobile performance is variable and not always available and can go down without notice, and it's not a guaranteed service, it's a maybe or maybe not. This is happening more frequently these days, recently perhaps linked to the 5G upgrades. The 4G cost can be high and it's not possible to predict, and this can cause what's known in the industry as bill shock, and if you get a bill shock call from the project team QS, then that could be an issue. Migrating from one connectivity solution to another, i.e. starting on 4G and then moving to fibre when installed and back to 4G when closing out the project, can also increase costs, require multiple site visits, and takes the site team connectivity down whilst migrating from one solution to another. Ideally, one solution end-to-end would be preferable and should be more cost effective. So one of the questions that we should ask ourselves on a construction project constantly is this: what are we doing about it? I'm not answering that. Lawrence will do that in the next session. But one thing I do know is this, that real-time monitoring is 99% dependent on connectivity, whether latent or constant. Thank you. Over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you. So first of all, just a little bit about EMS. We were established back in 2000 as a software development house. And a particular project in the sort of mid-noughties led us to really focus on connectivity for the construction industry. So we launched our first generation of then 3G IMO bonded routers back in 2006. With a focus very much on the construction industry, pardon me, from the beginning. So initial customers were people like Taylor Woodrow, Jackson Civils, and Shepherd. Over the years since 2006, we've extended our presence in construction and have done business over the years with probably at least half of the top 100 construction companies in the UK. Plus also, we've obviously entered other vertical markets in retail, logistics, government, broadcasting, and in the events industry, all, let's say, having the common requirement for quick, reliable connectivity. As I think Stuart mentioned, we're also active in delivering fibre to the home solutions and microwave networks for commercial customers. A good example of that at the moment is the work that we're doing at Whitehill and Borden in Hampshire, which I believe is the largest, or at least one of the very largest regeneration projects currently running in the United Kingdom. And again, to echo a comment made by Stuart, we are, from a software development point of view, the developer of the Be Able distancing solution for safe management of workers on construction sites during the current pandemic. Next slide, please, James. I won't bore you by going through all of our customers. Some of them will be familiar and some won't. Obviously, in the construction sector, people like Balfour Beatty, Taylor Wimpey, Zero C and Tarmac are well-known names. But you can also see that we're active in television broadcast, in all sorts of different government-related organisations, and with retailers, some pretty major retailers, and indeed their logistics supply chains. Again, all customers who are, to a greater or lesser extent, reliant on connectivity solutions of different types that we provide. Next slide, please, James. So probably a statement of the obvious for all of us. The objective, I think, for pretty much any contractor is connectivity from day one at site. Next slide, please, James. And as Stuart has said, there are a number of options that are available, and the one that historically people have tended to reach for is obviously a fixed line connection, whether that's some sort of fibre connection or a copper-based line. And it's not surprising that that's what people reach for, because it's familiar, it's reliable, and in theory, the performance is predictable. The problem, as many of you will be very familiar with, is that lead times, which were probably always rather long, have extended during the current COVID crisis really quite substantially. So we have quite a number of customers who are indicating suggested lead times for a fibre lease line of in excess of 180 days currently. And of course, the solution may well be very expensive. So there may well be excess construction charges to get the link to the site. And there will almost certainly be, invariably, there will be a contractual tie-in of possibly up to 36 months once you've procured your fixed line. And of course, again, as some of you will be painfully aware, cabling in the ground is easily damaged. Next slide, please, James. One way of mitigating that latter risk really is obviously to go with a microwave network plus a fixed line. So that's a good way to connect potentially numerous cabins or buildings on a large site. It reduces the risk of cable damage at site, but it still obviously requires a point of presence for a fixed line somewhere on the site. Typically, it'll require some professional assistance to set up, and changes during the build process may well require changes to the microwave network in order to maintain line of sight signal path. Next slide, please, James. James? Sorry, next slide, please. One more. Yes, that's the one we were looking for. That wasn't for theatrical effect, I'm sure. So the solution that we would tend to propose, which if you like ticks all of the boxes or gives us a nice list of pluses, is our IMO OptiBond solution, which is a bonded 4G or bonded WAN system. WAN typically meaning fixed lines in this context. So what does the product do? It bonds or aggregates multiple 4G or fixed line connections in order to provide a faster, more responsive link with greater bandwidth. It gives you the ability to aggregate diverse 4G networks. So you could decide that you were going to put in this device a Vodafone SIM, an O2 SIM, a 3 SIM, an EE SIM, and then add, if you have the good fortune to have a wired network at site, also one or more fixed line links to give you a very, very high degree of resilience. The mobile networks that we're working with are typically increasingly offering unlimited tariffs, and those unlimited tariffs obviously get us away from the whole bill shock situation that Stuart was talking about previously. So the issue of data limits and crashing those data limits and running up costs, or simply finding yourself disconnected, is becoming manageable. And the other good thing about our bonded service, the other positive, is that it's a managed service that also provides a static IP and allows you to configure a VPN to ease integration into the corporate IT network. So this is a major differentiator for lower cost, simple 4G devices, which don't give you that kind of capability. So to sort of wrap up what is the IMO Optibond proposition, essentially it's part service and part product. So we offer a desktop mobile coverage survey to identify that there is 4G coverage at a site. We deliver a Optibond router pre-configured, so that's a plug and play device which integrates directly into your IT infrastructure as soon as it's delivered to the site. We provide 4G outdoor aerials to erect for best possible signal. We provide suitable mobile network SIMs with an agreed data allowance, possibly unlimited if that's what you require for a large site. And we provide a whole managed service wrap around this to allow for the aggregation service of multiple 4G or fixed line, plus obviously a support wrap to keep the service on the road. Next slide, please, James. Pictures probably tell, or are more interesting, let's say, than words. So a couple of pictures of two of the primary products. So the IMO 310 product, the back panel is, IT people always tell me, more interesting than the front panel. So you can see that this device can take up to 6 4G SIMs, and the row of Ethernet ports in the back, you could set up to 4 of those as so-called one port. So you could connect an ADSL router or an FTTC fixed line router into those and start aggregating fixed lines where you have availability of those. Next slide, please, James. There's an alternative, slightly lighter weight product, does much the same job, but allows for you to add up to 4 data SIMs, plus obviously 2 Ethernet ports on the back. One will always be required for connecting an access point or your device directly to, but one is available again for connecting a fixed line router, a fixed line modem to give you the option of also having additional resilience based around some sort of fixed line service if it's available. Next slide, please, James. In fact, that I think brings us to the question and answers. Back to you, Vanessa, I believe.
Thanks so much, Lawrence and Stuart. Some great tips there to increase productivity by improving connectivity at your construction site. So now to the Q&A. I do have some other questions here that were sent in before. Lawrence, how long does it take from deciding you need decent internet to installing it and getting it up and running? And what are the costs to get it up and running?
Well, if we talk about the IMO product, the IMO 210 product, which you saw a little picture of a few moments ago, typically we can have those configured and shipped to a site within 2 or 3 working days of receipt of order. So that gives you an indication, if you like, of the timescale, and that clearly compares, I think, very favorably with 90 to 180 to maybe even more days for a lease line. Regarding costs, there are a couple of options. One option is obviously the outright purchase of the device, and these devices, including subscriptions for the annual bonding service and an annual subscription to SIMs, probably rounds out at a little under £3,000 in total. Which again is attractive, I think, in comparison with the sort of pricing for getting lease lines provisioned. If the project is of shorter duration, there is obviously a rental option. Again, that includes all of the service wrap and the SIMs, and that would be, pardon me, typically between sort of £400 or £500 a month, depending on what sort of data allowances, or indeed if you want unlimited SIMs provisioned with the device. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour. Obviously, people are very welcome to contact us with their specific requirements in terms of numbers of units and locations and data requirements and so forth, and we'll price as required against that.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. And Stuart, can you give me a couple of examples of software that you'd use on a project that is critical for having good connection?
Okay, do you want trade names? Would that be acceptable? One thing I'm thinking about is the Primavera P6, and I'm also thinking about for planning, and I'm thinking of accounting software, Coins, for an example. These require good connectivity, and certainly if you link them into some of the other applications that we use around the site, we've got some of the Autodesk products, the likes of PlanGrid and so on, which do require the connectivity that we referred to earlier. I mean, they can work without, but connectivity is pretty much the oil that makes things go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And Lawrence, why should someone use a bonded router over a 4G router or over satellite? What are the benefits?
Okay, so well, I think we've maybe partially addressed that in my presentation, hopefully, but obviously a bonded router gives you two, I would say, significant advantages over a standard router. One, greater bandwidth because you're aggregating a number of different connections, and secondarily, obviously, greater resilience because whilst you're doing that aggregation of separate connections, you're also obviously making use of separate individual networks, which typically aren't sharing infrastructure. And consequently, if, just harking back to a point that Stuart made earlier, if one mobile network disappears because it's being upgraded to 5G locally, or simply because there's an outage of some description, you have other mobile networks present in the area typically that will maintain the service. So that they're the key differentiators, if you like, versus maybe a simple 4G type service. I think the other one was you were mentioning was satellite. So I guess when we first came into this industry 15 years or so ago, satellite was probably the go-to solution where fixed line was impractical or uneconomic or whatever. I'd have to say, I think as a technology, other people may disagree, but I think it's faded to a significant extent. Primarily because it suffers very greatly from latency. So that really means that the amount of time it takes for a signal to go all the way up 12,000 miles to the satellite and back down again, and that's fairly disastrous for quite a lot of modern light kind of applications. So services that are being provided over the web, they just don't work terribly well in that kind of environment, as some people may well have had experience. So that's really why I think 4G scores over satellite in that environment.
Excellent, thank you. And what would be the greatest advances, would you say, in 4G bonded router kind of technology in the past 10 years?
Oh, that's a large timescale, I have to say. I mean, I guess we go back 10 years, and of course we were using 3G. We have been on 4G for quite some time, and the latest products that we offer support the 4G plus standard, which I suppose you might argue is sort of halfway to 5G. Which obviously boosts bandwidth further over and above sort of the lower grade levels of 4G. And I think obviously that the product has been productized in a much more comprehensive way over that time frame. So people like Stuart may vaguely remember that back in 2006, the IMO OptiBond product was essentially a printed circuit board that the person at site installed in their desktop PC, and then it obviously has gone through, well, now 3 generations of products since then. So if you like, the completeness, if you like, for want of a better term, of the product has greatly improved over time.
Thank you very much.
Lawrence, I do.
Stuart, do you have any comment on that question?
I do remember, and I do remember another version coming in a suitcase. which I can't remember the exact name, but it wasn't a huge suitcase that you go on holidays with, but it was a suitcase and all the bits and pieces were in it, explanation, everything else, and it solved. It certainly solved the problem on a project that I was working, because there was absolutely no connectivity whatsoever, and unlikely to be any. So it was get us out of a fix quick, Lawrence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And have you been able to, Stuart, could you share any experience on real life projects where connectivity has really impacted the success of the project?
Yes, I can go back a number of years, around about the time that Lawrence touched on, where for the very reason the project didn't go down the route of a fixed line because of the prohibitively high cost. And it was just around the time when protocol had changed and the site elected to go down I'm not even sure we were on 3G then, but yeah, we went down the mobile route and it was a disaster from start to finish. The project overran, and it was combined. It was a compounded issue, really. Information couldn't get to site, the information couldn't get from site back to design, and it just went on and ultimately the project suffered. So that was, yeah, a horrific experience that hopefully will never be repeated. But one of those things, and we learn from it, and you move on, and thanks to organisations like EMS and Lawrence, you come up with some great solutions, and you know, for the next job, you know better.
So, thank you, Stuart.
And Lawrence, just in the final few minutes, have you got any positive project stories that you could share about, you know, EMS, IMO, or the bonded routers that's really got a project out of a fix?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we have a number of construction industry clients who found the solution worked very well for them and have gone from perhaps using a handful of units on a few difficult projects to having anything like 50 or 60 deployed almost as their go-to solution for connectivity, rather than ever really even considering trying to get fixed lines to certain projects or certain difficult to serve sites. It's probably also worth mentioning, although it's a little outside the construction industry, that we've seen really considerable demand during the pandemic from a variety of organizations, particularly people in the supply chain industry, and in things like the marketing communications, the marketing industry, the events industry, quite simply because these people have traditionally not had difficulty procuring lease lines. They've been at very obvious locations which are well served, but during the pandemic they suddenly find themselves in a situation where they are having to spin up warehousing capacity to meet demand from either retail clients or organizations such as the NHS, and they're required to provision that extremely quickly. They're not able to procure leased lines, and they have been coming to us to use the bonded 4G product to meet that requirement. So yes, no, I mean it's a positive story in relation to using bonded 4G as an alternative to fixed line.
Very interesting. So would you say for sites that have an urgent job and they've just set up and there's no fixed line availability and perhaps not much Wi-Fi, EMS is probably the perfect solution?
Well, it's very kind of you to suggest that, Vanessa. I guess I probably would, but yes, in all seriousness, obviously it's a solution that I think is widely proven. You'll have seen from the customer slide that it's being used by a wide variety of what you might describe as household names, enterprise clients, but there are also, of course, many much smaller users as well. And I think in general, people find that it meets a requirement for them.
Yes, you've got some really great customers there. And so if someone wanted to inquire about, what that might look like, what would be the process?
Well, people are very welcome to contact us, me, either through LinkedIn, or I think I'd put an email address, sales@ems-uk.com, up earlier in the chat box. We're very happy to hear, obviously, what your specific requirements are, what the challenges that you're needing to solve, and happy to obviously provide a proposal against that.
And how fast could it be set up? You know, if someone was in a real hurry, what, couple of days?
Yes, I mean, we probably, as I think I said before, 2 or 3 working days is realistic for us to have a unit ready to ship. It's probably fair to say it depends a little bit on what configuration requirements you have. So that timescale is certainly realistic if a simple internet access connection is all you require. Obviously, if there's a VPN to be set up, then it may well be that it will be the case that we need to work with your IT department, because both ends obviously need to take on board tasks when configuring a VPN. But even so, typically it shouldn't have more than another working day or 2 in most circumstances to the delivery lead time.
Yes, and you have many, large household name clients. So I guess that should portray a certain sense of trust. You've been working with them for a very long time, 25 years you've been in business. So yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, so I might just invite closing comments from Stuart Young before I hand back to you, Lawrence, to close.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say thanks to EMS, thanks to Vanessa, thanks for the invitation. Great to be able to share some thoughts and ideas, and hopefully move things forward. So great opportunity. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Vanessa.
I'd like to say thank you to everybody for your time. Hopefully it's been useful, and hopefully if it has indeed been useful and you think we could assist you further, then please do reach out. We'd be delighted to hear from you and understand what your issues and challenges are, and do our very best to assist you in solving them. Thank you again to everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. James, could you just show the closing slide that has all the emails on it, please? So that, it doesn't have the email on it, but it's got ems-uk.com. If you're interested in getting in touch with EMS, please pop onto the website or email sales@ems-uk.com to talk to Lawrence. And we've popped the LinkedIn profiles in the chat. Thank you very much for joining today. Hope it's been of interest, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.